the audience tonight, and we're excited to bring you this subway stations overview. I'm your host, Lonnie Stern, with my co-host, Jocelyn Vokes, who's hopefully here today as well. And actually, I've noticed that we have some special guests in the audience tonight. I see that Councilmember Ann Kitchen is here, and I'm not sure if you wanted to say hello, but if you unmute, can.
Yes, I would love to. Hi, everyone. This is Councilmember Kitchen. I'm represent Central South Austin. I'm also on the Cat Metro board. Just want to say welcome to everyone. It's so important to participate in these meetings. We all want to know what you think about the proposed design for the various Project Connect components. And so there's a very important one that I'm very interested in hearing about tonight, and I know you all are too. So please share your thoughts and continue to participate, and let your friends and neighbors know that we're here and we're wanting to hear from you. Thank you very much, Lonnie.
Thanks so much, and thank you for being here. I sincerely appreciate it on behalf of everyone on the team here at the Austin Transit Partnership and all the various people who make these events happen. And tonight we are going to be sharing some information about the Project Connect vision, and then we're going to talk through the subway stations, some of the tunnel technology, and even accessibility features. And we want this to be an interactive discussion. So first, feel free to put any questions you like in the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of your screen. And we will, there's a whole bunch of people in the background who'll be working on getting those questions answered live. Also, we're going to be stopping at various points in the presentation to open the mic and ask some questions live. So as we get to those places, we'll make it possible for you to raise your hand, so that way you can ask some of those questions on screen. And right now, the chat is open just for panelists backstage in case you're having technical difficulties, but we will be closing the chat shortly. And our goal tonight is to wrap it up by 7 p.m. and go back to dinner with our families. But before we get too far, I was hoping, Jocelyn, that you might also roll out the red carpet for our Spanish language participants tonight.
Sure, yeah. And just for fairness of interpretation, I'd say for anyone who's interested or knows someone who is interested in listening to this meeting in Spanish, we do provide that service. All you have to do is click the interpretation button at the bottom of your screen and select Spanish. And you'll listen to it through your headset or your phone in your very own language. So I will now take a moment to offer those same instructions in Spanish for those who haven't tuned in yet. Buenas noches, mi nombre es Jocelyn Vokes, gerente de participación pública para Austin Transit Partnership. Gracias por estar con nosotros en esta reunión pública acerca de las estaciones de metro. Si está participando en español, es posible que actualmente ya esté escuchando la interpretación en vivo, pero si no es así y desea escuchar esta reunión en español, solo hay que buscar el botón de interpretación en la parte inferior de la pantalla. Oprime el botón y seleccione la opción de español. Más adelante en el programa tendremos la oportunidad de aportar comentarios en vivo. Si desea participar en español, nuestros intérpretes estarán para apoyarles. Quedamos a la orden y con su permiso continuaremos con la reunión en inglés con interpretación al español. Thank you. We'll transition to our slideshow for tonight.
All right, so before we get started, I think we should introduce some of our speakers. So if you're out there, if you could turn on your camera and say hello, you'll pop up for people depending on how they have their Zoom settings set up. But first, let me walk through them. There's Peter Mullen, who's our Chief of Architecture and Urban Design at the ATP. He's waving for those who can see. We've got Paulo Faria, Senior Director of Architecture and Urban Design for ATP. Then let's see, we've got, with the Orange Line team, we have Andrew Knip from AECOM, as well as Vikram Sinha from the Austin Transit Partnership. And then for the Blue Line, we've got Lindsay Wood, who should be there and hopefully waving. Yep, and then Jocelyn Vokes is going to be helping do that walkthrough too. So now you got some familiar faces and we've got a lot of work to do. So with no further ado, I'd like to hand the mic over to Peter Mullen to walk through implementing the project.
Great, thank you, Lonnie. I'm just going to kick us off tonight, and thank you everybody for attending. Really appreciate your participation, and we're going to really appreciate your participation as we go forward with the planning and implementation of this incredible program. So go to the next, please. So, so tonight, just the agenda, right? We're just introductions. We've done that. I'm going to do a quick overview of Project Connect. Then I'm going to pass it to Paolo, who's going to talk about an overview of the subway features. Then we're going to go through each of the stations one by one, and then we'll talk about some next steps. So a lot of ground to cover, but we will have stops along the way so we can have some robust discussion. Next. I think we're a few slides behind, so go to the next. Great. Next, great. Thanks. So just a reminder, go back one. Just a reminder, so when we're talking about any one element of Project Connect, we always have to think about it. How does it participate in the system as a whole, right? The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So in Project Connect is certainly a system, which includes new elements that dovetail with existing transit elements and features. So all of that has to fit together and work to be optimized to serve the community as broadly as we possibly can. Obviously, 2 new light rail lines, the orange line and the blue line, a big component of that, but also the program involves a new commuter line, the green line, you know, the red line improvements to the red line to existing commuter line, 4 new Metro Rapid lines, 2 of which are already under construction. So we're already starting to move into implementation on certain aspects of the program. You know, the improvements to local service, new park and rides, new pickup zones, new facilities, lots of different elements. All these pieces have to fit together into this working system. Next. And just right off the bat, I want to talk about the elephant in the room, which I think has gotten a bit of press of late, and probably not a surprise to most of you. But costs on the program are going up. I mean, that's what we're seeing. Some of that is being driven by things we've discovered along the way, right? And so part of this process is really the design process is really about identifying all those elements that will have an impact on costs so that then we can manage those going forward. And some of those include, additional right-of-way and real estate costs, changes to project program scope, right? So, we learn things from the technical process, we hear things from the community, we adjust the design accordingly. Some of those things have increased cost. But also globally, we're seeing enormous inflation and construction escalation costs. This is a global phenomenon, but particularly acute here in Austin, where the economy is so overheated, or so hot, I should say. And so all these factors are contributing to a pretty extreme cost environment. And that's, going to be something that we're going to have to manage, right? I think tonight is about looking at the design, looking at where we are today, right? And because a lot of work has gone into getting us to this point. But going forward, we're going to have to make some tough choices, right? As a community, we're going to have to look at project phasing. That's going to be an important part of managing costs, but there may be other choices that we're going to have to make. But I think importantly, that's going to be an ongoing and robust discussion with the community, right? This is, we're going to have to make these choices together and move this program forward together. And we're going to commit to do that. One of the things that we are committed to do also is not raise taxes, right? When we voted for this program and for the funding to support it, that was our mandate, was to work within those means, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to look for whatever other funding opportunities we can, which is additional funding sources from the federal government or elsewhere. But right, we are not going to raise taxes. So just want to make sure that everybody understands that. Okay, now that I got that out of the way, we can get to, more of the fun stuff. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Paolo, who's going to talk about our approach towards the subway system overall.
All right. Thank you, Peter. Thanks very much. So we are going to concentrate today on the underground station, the subway stations. I think that they have their the challenge on their own in terms of design, in terms of experience, in terms of how they relate to the urban realm. Really focus on the downtown stations, and we're going to go on a one-by-one basis and kind of evaluate and show their kind of sites, opportunities, and constraints. Next. It is really, that's a kind of an example of a typology. We are talking about relatively deep stations to be able to make the arrangement, the alignment work. Because we're coming underground, some locations we're going above ground. So we have to make it work. So we have to make those stations to a specific height and depth. The overall idea is that you engage in the urban realm, you get vertical circulation elements or stairs to a mezzanine or concourse, and make a decision that distributes yourself again to the platforms. So there are certain things associated with underground stations that are important. People lose their cognitive abilities. You can get lost underground because you lose your connection with the sky, you lose your connection with different elements that you know and recognize. So there are certain things in the navigation of the stations that are important. The idea of getting below grade, it's not something that humans like to do, and so we have to actually manage that and create experience that are orchestrated about our own cognitive challenges. Next. Ultimately, we have to design for all. So the aspiration is to implement universal design. So the designs are developed independent of individuals' abilities. So we have to design to the visually impaired. We have to design to the people that have mobility challenges. So one design has to fit all. So means that we have to adapt the design to provide equal access and universal design and full accessibility to all and equal accessibility. So the choices that should be made by people that are able-bodied should be the same choices that are made by somebody with a disability. Next. Another important thing is security and safety. We have to design for NFPA 130, but it's not just because we have to, but it's obvious that if you are underground and you have limited ways to escape for kind of conditions that rarely occur, but they do occur, fire or other emergencies, you have to make sure that the stations are ventilated and they're exhaust, and that people can achieve points of safety within time that kind of allow those systems to kick in, and without kind of a risk of to life. Next. From a design perspective, what's important is that we have three different zones. We have an entry pavilion that should be legible, meaning it has to be recognized on the urban realm because people have to find the stations. So it has to have a positive presence on the urban realm, something that enhances the public realm and the streetscape where it's sitting. We have to make the vertical circulation elements, elevators, stairs, escalators, visible at every moment, because as you are in a station zone, you want to see your options of vertical movement ahead of you. So visibility of vertical circulation elements, escalators, stairs, and elevators is paramount because it makes you anticipate your next step. What you don't want is people spending more time on the ground than they need to. So we want clear sight lines and as much visibility from a point of view of safety and navigation of the station as well. So there are certain things that we can orchestrate through design. So we're trying to orchestrate the experience, making sure that the sight lines, path of travels are clear, and that each zone can see the other zone, making sure that you have a kind of predictability on your next steps of the trip. Next. So we want to minimize the number of decision-making points. So you want to make a decision at the street, that is, I'm going in the subway. And to do that, you have to provide clear information about the system, where you need to go, clear information about if the service is running, if the service is running on time, what is the next train, where's the next train going, because you want to be able to push that decision to the streetscape and to the urban realm. So people only get inside the system when they have kind of a definitive information about the system and they can embark on the trip with. It is important from a point of view of safety as well, that you don't want people meandering and not uncertain about where they go. So right now the idea is that can we provide enough information at the right place at the right time so people engage with the system at the street. They go down underground to the mezzanine and concourse, and then they have to make another decision. Am I going southbound or northbound, eastbound or westbound? So you have a choice to make on which direction of the line or that you are taking, and then so you want to minimize decision-making points because you want people kind of be able to read the journey early and consistently. And we have several ways to do that. You can use light, you can use texture, color, form, public art to help people understand this journey and have a safe and tranquil trip. We want people to be at ease, and we want people to be comfortable and secure about the reliability of the system. Next. An important thing is natural light. As I said, you lose your bearings underground, and as you are underground, leaving a train or connecting with an underpass on a concourse, you want to see where the light is. You want to see where the sky is, and you should use natural light as a tool for intuitive wayfinding. You can have signage. Signage will support intuitive wayfinding, but you want the architecture to be guiding to where you need to go. So the design of the stations, the design of being that skylights or different ways to introduce natural light. And natural light has its own temperature, color, and quantity of color, and is tied to our circadian cycle. So knowing that at night or knowing that's day and understanding where the light is coming from helps people navigate the stations because they understand where they need to go. So the strategic and wise use of natural light is something that we're trying to foster through the stations as much as we can. Next. We don't always have the right way to have an entrance pavilion that has the proper kind of civic characteristics. We are trying to instill a sense of civic pride and made us all kind of owners of the infrastructure. Sometimes we don't have the space for that. So we have to use standalone elevators or standalone entrances that are smaller and have to fit on a sidewalk and have to fit on a smaller space. So I think that the basic kind of characteristics are not changed, but it's more a matter of scale and making sure that in those smaller entries, you have the same degree of certainty about the service running. So it's about, again, providing the correct information to the user at the right place and at the right time, independent of scale, depending on having to be in a building or in a canopy or in a stair in the sidewalk. Next. So just as a summary, I think we have to foster seamless path of travel, making sure that is direct and as straightforward as can be. We want to have visible and predictable entrance so people can orient themselves and can find the system. The system has a direct correlation on how usable it is. The success of the system has a direct correlation on how usable it is. So you have to make it entrances visible and predictable in the urban realm. Have a clear and organized passenger information plan that ties digital and physical information. So it's not just about the signage within the station, but it's what people are getting on their device, other planning tools like maps, area maps, strip line maps, making sure that all the pieces of this passenger information plan are integrated and are serving the user. Reduce as much as possible any blind spots. It's the application of SEPTED, that is environmental design for crime prevention through environmental design. That making sure that you don't have hidden places and niches and areas that your vision are obscured. It's not just from a safety perspective, but it's from a perception of safety perspective as well. You want people to be calm and safe as they navigate through the stations. No dead ends, and as I said, maximizing daylight. Really make sure that we foster intermodality integration. Can we kind of have entrances that provide a direct connection to the buses and to the to cycling infrastructure, making sure that the stations and the system, this LRT system or the light rail system, is not is something on its own. It has to be part, as Peter mentioned, part of the whole, and create as much as possible an enhanced presence in the urban realm. Provide a point of respite, because as I said, one of our major decision-making points is at street. So we need to provide enough of a buffer or a calming experience as you engage with the system at the street. Next. We want to hear from you in one of our pauses, or what are the types of amenities that you would like to see on the underground stations. We are trying to design based on the user needs, and we thought that would be good to just give some examples of what other systems use and the types of things that could be used, but that's not of the full menu of options of that we have, because we want to kind of really get to this to the full list, working with you. So some of those amenities, some of them are amenities, some others are necessary. Our customer service booth with attendants and ambassadors of the system that can help people that don't necessarily do well with digital tools and digital planning. So having somebody to talk to is always good. Retail or vending machines is that there is convenience and being able to grab something as you're going to work or going home. There are systems that actually, with new technology, that you can actually through your device scan a product and getting that. It requires a partnership with some supermarket, but retail, vending machines, water coolers, elements of wayfinding that more associated with the contents, area maps, institution maps, or elements that help you navigate outside of the station. So information products that are for the context in the urban realm, not necessarily for the station itself. The full integration of bikes and scooters. Maybe increased integration of bike infrastructure like bike pumps, fixing stations. We have a lot of screens because we need for the information products. Those screens could alternate with weather information, local events, or other type of information that we'd like to hear from you. Restrooms, seating areas, or leaning areas, spaces for people to plug their laptop and work, or we don't want people going to the stations to work because it's not an environment for that, the underground station. But there's a convenience of being able to send an email in a working counter. This is not uncommon in airports, understanding that the waiting time is far more. Communication devices, intercoms for safety and security. So some of those are kind of the more like the standard palette of things that we're looking at, but we'd like to hear from you if there are other opportunities that we haven't thought and doing something that is tailored to Austin. Next. One thing that's important to know is that constructability has direct impact on how the stations work. On the left, you have a cavern done by a TBM, that is a tunnel boring machine, that has smaller impact to the urban realm because you are kind of a tunneling in a mining way, but that has some issues of cost and has to be in the correct soil. It has to have in the same alignment. So you can do that everywhere. So we have to actually engineer things to choose one of those two options. The other is cut and cover. That's top-down construction, that you retain the wall and then you excavate and you build something underground. But we are not talking about that because we don't know what those things are right now. We know what are the techniques, but we don't know when we're going to apply them. But my next slide is just to point out that depending on how we actually build, there are different expressions for the station. On the left is the Elizabeth line in London done by TBMs, where you actually have the shape of the tunnel being excavated that provides a more compressed space, where wayfinding is more fundamental, that you have to really have those tunnels where you go and connect A to B in a very direct way, and that it requires one type of architecture and design expression. On the right, we have cut and cover. That is really, you can create grander spaces, but that are better for wayfinding. But at the same time, there are kind of its pros and cons that go beyond what we need to do. If it was left for architects to choose those things, we would know what to choose. But in reality, this has impacts and have kind of really a lot of engineering to happen for one of those two methods to be chosen. And we are not there yet. Okay, so that's my part, and I'll let my colleagues go in more detail for the on the Orange Line North stations. Thank you.
Thanks, Paulo.
Hey,
Hey, Vikram. So Vikram and I are going to cover the 4 Orange Line stations today. And we'll kind of be passing it back and forth to cover different elements. So I think Vikram will start out here.
Yeah. Next slide. Great. So here's a slide of Capitol West and the Government Center Station as proposed. Just to point out some landmarks, you can see the Texas Capitol to the southeast or bottom left of your screen. Capitol Complex is directly east of the proposed station entrances. And you can see some existing and future remaining bus stops here. Also want to point out, just how much of a major employment center this is for Austin, and how this is a station that we're foreseeing a lot of ridership here, just to serve the existing and future growth of the state of Texas. Yeah, and then also there's a circumference showing the 5-minute walk shed. So Texas Capitol will be 5 minutes from the station entrances. Next slide, please. And then just diving in a little closer on the station itself, you can see here that we're calling out some of the major land uses. Clay Pit Restaurant, as well as the Twin Liquors a little further east, some hotels, Office of the Attorney General, Texas Medical Association. So some major employers just located really around Guadalupe where the station is. And you can see the outline of the station box towards the center of your screen, just within the street itself. And then the station entrances kind of taking up some space on the sidewalk there. Also want to note Dive Bar and Arturo's at the bottom right of your screen, or very far northeast corner of kind of the station complex, let's call it. And so that's going to be some back of house infrastructure there, which Andrew's going to talk a little bit more about. Back to you, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Vikram. And yeah, just to connect a little bit with some of what Paula was covering, ideally we want to have nice, large plazas for, customer wayfinding. But in this dense, downtown urban core, there's not as much right-of-way available. So we have to get a little creative, as Paulo covered earlier, with how we arrange different entrances. You'll notice that we have different types of entrances. So we have escalators, stairs, and elevators. If you look kind of at the 15th Street, you'll see, so could you go back just real quick, please? Thank you. There at 15th Street, that's kind of our more prominent entrance with the plaza configuration. And we are cutting into some private right-of-way in that area to make that possible. But you'll notice there's a little bit smaller footprint entrances, such as the elevator on the other side of the street. And then if you go up to 17th Street there, you'll notice those are more what we call sidewalk entrances. So the vertical circulation is kind of built into the sidewalk footprint and not within the private right-of-way. So there's kind of both types of land uses associated with this entrance. Next slide, please. And as you look at how those entrances start to interact with the underground station, you can see how important that concourse level becomes. And a big point here with these stations in particular is that we have side platforms. So whereas some stations might have a central platform that can access both the northbound and the southbound tracks, we do have side platforms. So that concourse level becomes very critical for those wayfinding elements. Once you get down to that concourse level, really knowing which direction you're trying to go and, using the vertical circulation elements on either side of that concourse level accordingly. I also want to point out the darker blue represents kind of an unpaid zone. So as you enter the station from the street down to the concourse level, you will land on that unpaid zone, either from the 17th Street entrance there on the north side, or the little bit larger unpaid zone on the south side there near 15th Street. And there will be fare collection to access that main concourse level and then access the platform from there. So there will be those elements as well in each of these stations as we go through. I also want to point out with this station, we do have back of house elements, as Vikram has pointed out. Those are represented by that gray color. And those are really critical to make the station operate well. Those are, everything from lighting to air conditioning to ventilating the underground station, which becomes very critical for safety, in the event of a fire or an emergency, making sure the air quality underground is, safe for humans. That's absolutely critical with all these underground stations. So even, that's not going to be available to the public to access, but it is critical kind of to make those stations operate. So I did want to point that out, and you will notice those elements in all of our underground stations. Next slide, please. So that covers Government Center, and we'll move a little bit further south here to Republic Square, down near 5th and 6th Streets on Guadalupe. So back to you, Vikram, to cover the area.
Yeah, just really quickly, this is an exciting area. A lot of changes happening here. So, we're looking again to place the station a little north of Republic Square, but really the station box itself will be located under the street. And yeah, just a lot of things going on here. And Andrew, I'll let you talk a little bit more about it.
Sure, thanks, Vikram. Yeah, just one thing that I didn't point out at Government Center, but I think is even more critical here at Republic Square are the bus transfers. So, right at the square there between 4th and 5th Street, that's a major bus hub for Austin. So having those good connectivity points from the local buses to the, underground light rail system is going to be absolutely critical. And that will continue to be planned along with the orange line and blue line designs as we progress. But those connection points are absolutely critical. So making sure that we have bus stops located near our station entrances, that will continue to be of prominence here. This station's a little bit different than the Government Center in that we do go off of the right of way a little bit more. There between 5th and 6th Street, we do have a little bit more room for kind of that prominent station entry plaza and really the activation of that public space, which is just great for this area in particular. So that area between 5th and 6th has all the elements, 2 elevators, 2 escalators down to that concourse level. And just one point to make here as well is that we do need redundancy. So, in the case of one of these elements breaking down, we want to make sure that universal access is maintained at all times. So that's why you see typically 2 of each of these types of elements in these stations. And we do have a secondary entrance, if you want to call it that, down at 4th Street, which is more in line with the sidewalk and not within the private right of way. So we do have kind of both of those types of entrances down to that concourse level. So next slide, please. So this concourse level is actually very unique in that it's currently envisioned to be a longer concourse level. And this might change as we go on, but we are currently envisioning connecting this station with an underground pedestrian concourse all the way to the Congress station, which we'll cover in a little bit with the Blue Line team. So this is a kind of a unique element with this station in particular, having that underground concourse that's a little bit longer and a little bit more prominent to connect those 2 major stations in this very prominent area of downtown. Again, you'll notice those same elements of vertical circulation in that paid zone to either side of the side platforms. And you'll also notice the back of house here kind of surrounding that public area. So all the same elements. This station in particular, I think we have a section view, if I'm not mistaken, next. Yeah, great. So just wanted to point out that this station is actually a little bit deeper. So it has 3 levels rather than 2 levels like we saw in Government Center. So what this allows us to do is really have that nice long public space in the form of that concourse, given that we can locate some of the back of house elements on that first level closest to the surface and create that nice continuous concourse all the way to that Congress Avenue station with the Blue Line, and then obviously down to the platform level to create all those wayfinding elements and nice public spaces underground. I think we might pause here a little bit for some questions and answers. So back to you, Lonnie.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks for your help. And Andrew, don't go away, and let's not pull down the slides. For folks who are tuning in, you may notice that at the bottom of your screen there is the raise hand feature. And if you want, you can click to raise your hand, and we will take some questions live in this section. At the same time, I'm watching on another screen right here a very active Q&A. And so I wanted to bring some of these questions into the discussion as we wait for people to raise their hands. But one question that we've gotten like 7 different versions of are about elevator access. So can we go back to Government Center Station for a sec, Camila? Great. Well, so let's get over to the detail that shows elevator and escalator access. So I guess there's a question about whether there is an elevator access. I think that this last one will do it for us. Can we just go back over that? It looks like there's, how many elevators are there, and where are they located, and where are the escalators? Because people are
sure.
The questions about this in the Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. So in this particular case, we do have 2 elevators to kind of create that redundancy that I covered a little bit later at the Republic Square station. So If you just orient yourself to the northeast corner of 15th Street in front of the Attorney General's office there, we
Yeah,
do
can
have
you
one elevator there.
circle that just with your cursor where it says station entrance elevator above the Attorney General's office, just so people see that. All right. So
Yep,
that's
so
one
that's
elevator.
one of the elevators. Yeah, exactly. And then the other elevator would be there on the southwest corner of 17th Street, down, up a little bit further north. So we do have an elevator stair combo there. And as we go further south to 15th, we have an elevator, stair, and escalator combo at that area. So we have 2 elevators, 2 stairs, 1 escalator, I believe, for this station.
Okay, so I think a lot of the comments are talking about probably that 17th Street entrance and not having the redundancy for an elevator there. So just making sure that that got brought into the conversation here tonight. At Republic Square, I think there's a lot of redundancy built in there already. Correct? Can we see this same version, Jamila? There we go. And so again, you've got station entrances that have multiple elevators in this area at the station entry plaza.
Yeah, so in this case, we actually do have 2 elevators there at the more prominent station entry plaza, as well as a 3rd elevator there at 4th Street.
Okay.
So 3 in this case.
Great. I appreciate that. That helps a lot. And then there are lots of other questions in here, but I see 3 hands up. So I'm going to go ahead and allow David. I've made it possible for you to talk. If you unmute, you can be live on the air.
Thank you so much, Lonnie. I do have a question about cost cutting regarding some of these. Is there any discussion about maybe scaling back some of these, specifically like the mezzanines that connect one station from another? Since we have sidewalks, that seems like a, sort of an added luxury. Is there any way of maybe like delaying those to, to manage costs, or is that still being looked at?
So to your point, everything is still being looked at. Right now, we're walking through the system as we would like it to be. And certainly we're open to discussions about what the system could look like given the cost situation that was mentioned earlier. So we don't know what form that's going to take. A lot of that discussion is going to be with the community and identifying like why you feel that one particular aspect of the project is, a luxury, whereas for other people, they might feel that it's a necessity. And so we're going to have a robust conversation with the community first before we make any sort of, value engineering decisions about any of these stations. Thanks for that and for being involved today. I see also Lyndon Henry. Now, Lyndon, you had technical difficulties last time. I'm allowing you to talk. Unmute. I hope it comes through.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you did it, Lyndon. Let's. What have you got for us tonight?
Just a couple of things, and I'll give you both of them, and then you can respond on rather than take one at a time. First of all, I presume there will be escalators. You can just tell me yes or no, but I think they're extremely important because to handle large volumes of people moving in and out, especially from a subway in a downtown, your core area, you're going to need escalators. And I saw them in some of the earlier graphics that you showed tonight. And so I presume you're going to be planning those, but they're not. I'm not seeing them in the drawings here. The other thing is amenities in terms of food service, shopping opportunities for passengers in the mezzanine area, and that includes of various things, entertainment venues, for example. All of those were shown in the early promotions, even before the vote in 2020. And I think they're an excellent thing. I think that's one of the most important things that can be accomplished. This is transit-oriented development on steroids. And I think that if there's any way to at least plan for that and to include that, I'm all for saving money, as you know, and I've been beating the drum on that and finding ways to cut costs. But this is one of the areas where you want to try to have enough in your budget to be able to plan for this, and also to encourage outside investment, if at all possible, that could buy into this, that could actually help pay for it ultimately, and to help pay for the overall operation of the subway. You've got a lot of operational costs. You've got, you know, ventilation especially that's involved in cleaning and maintenance and so forth. But all of that can be handled with that too. But also just as an amenity for passengers to have those kinds of services. That was one of the things that I thought was really attractive about the early promotional activity. So anyway, you could address those issues.
Thanks, Lyndon. And so I can give you some easy answers. Yes, escalators are planned as part of these entrances. The great thing about escalators is even when they're out of order, they are a convenience, and they still will get you where you need to go. And in addition, we agree that activation is the key to making these stations vibrant places. And so we've, in the lead up to the plan, we came up with several different scenarios. I don't know that every underground station is going to be activated at the same level, but certainly there is an amenities and activation plan. And as we move into the 60% design round, and we really start dialing down into which amenities are required, requested, required versus requested, we'll have a more specific answer about what kind of activation will be at each of these stations. So yeah, I think we've got time for one more question at this exact moment. But again, if you want to keep your hand raised, you can. If you want to bring questions into the Q&A, we'll start answering them. I think several of them have been posted already. But right now, I think I'm going to open up Rebecca Taylor. If you unmute, you can be live on the air.
Hi, Lonnie. Thank you so much for having this conversation. I'm a big fan of public transit. I have a question from the perspective of living along the Toomey Road, Barton Springs down by Zilker. I was intrigued by the Auditorium Shores mentioned on the map. And I'm wondering if you could say a few words about what impact on traffic through and to Zilker Park you think some of these transit options might have.
So Rebecca, I don't want to take away any of the excitement that is planned for the very next section. So just for all of you who are watching, we're doing Government Center and Republic Square Station right now. Then we're going to go south of the river and we're going to hit Auditorium Shores and Soco. And then we're going to come back to downtown, focusing on that 4th Street and Convention Center area. So I'm going to dodge this question at the moment, hope we cover it during this next section. And because we've saved a little bit of time here, Rebecca, I'm going to move to the next person. But if we don't answer your question and I see your hand raised, I will take your question sooner than later in the next section. All right, so Howard, you got a freebie here. If you unmute, you can be live on the air.
Yeah, thank you. This is Howard Curtis. I guess my question is somewhat more forward-looking. My academic major was in Japanese studies. I've lived in Japan for 3 years. I've been there on business hundreds of times, and as you know, Tokyo's rail and subway system is incredibly complex, probably the most sophisticated in the world. So one thing that happens is you add subways to existing subways and such, is that you have to kind of coordinate the intersections of the stations, and typically you have to tunnel deeper to get under existing lines with new lines. I just wondered if thought, and this would probably be at a very high level, but the current system is essentially as proposed north to south. One can imagine that in the future there'll be an east to west component. How might that tie into what we're currently planning? Well,
it's definitely, first of all, thank you for bringing up that question. It's really kind of a question about future-proofing the system in case, I could think of an example, 4th Street, the red line currently ends at the convention center, and the Union Pacific line, which is on Mopac, shows up on the western side of town. So certainly there are opportunities over the long haul that are not part of Project Connect. Andrew, have you, or is there somebody else on the team who's here tonight? Have you been considering that, or is that really like so long range that it's not really on the radar at the moment?
Yeah, I would just point out that we do have an east-west component in the blue line, and there is a connection of those two lines down near Republic Square. So that is already being included in our current system planning. But great question about future lines. I'm sure they'll be needed as time goes on. I can tell you that we're up against a lot of engineering constraints, and I wouldn't say that we're thinking about future proofing necessarily, but we'd have to go deeper certainly to connect some of those underground stations if we do add a subway line routing out. You're absolutely right, but I would say we're already kind of future proofing with the current design in that we're tying those two lines together at that kind of downtown transit hub there at Republic Square. So in that particular case, I'd say we are already thinking towards the future and designing for a very high capacity system once it's all constructed. So thanks for your question.
All right, fellas. Well, I'm going to get out of your way here while you cover those next 2 stations south of the river. Hopefully we can catch up a little bit and then head to downtown.
Great. Thanks, Lonnie.
Great. Actually, Vikram, I think I'm going to take the next few. Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Sorry.
Yeah. So, so Orange Line South Station, we have 2 underground stations on the Orange Line south of the river. The question is like, how do we get to that? And there are a lot of questions in the Q&A I saw about, there originally was a plan to bridge over the lake. So just a little bit of history in terms of the design process and how the road we took to get here. So when we were at 15% design, right, we had done some analysis about alternatives for getting either over or under the lake. And when we looked at how to get over the lake on a bridge, we recognized that there were a whole series of actual constraints that were going to make that very challenging, if not impossible. One is that the portal would have to be located basically across 2nd Street. So that would basically cut off 2nd Street to cross traffic, which would be, I think, a problem downtown. Second of all, there are like a ton of big utilities, both in Cesar Chavez and in 2nd Street, and that were presenting conflicts with, trying to get up out of the ground, basically in that stretch. And then thirdly, when we get across the river, there's actually a pretty substantial floodplain on the south side of the lake, which would require us to have a kind of an elevated section of the Orange Line for a fairly long stretch, right? So for all those factors, right, the engineering recommendation was to basically stay underground, under the lake to avoid all those conflicts. Let's go to the next. And you can go to the next. So again, at 50%, we presented the public 2 different options for how to do that. There was the short tunnel and the long tunnel. So both of them at an underground station at Auditorium Shores. And then in the short tunnel version, we would, which is the option A on the left, we would come up out of the ground. We would portal out of the ground, basically around Nelly Street. So north is up in these diagrams. And then that would basically transition to an at-grade running orange line, surface running orange line. And we would have the Soco station at grade basically around the Lively Middle School. So you can see that sort of on the bottom left. The long tunnel option was to actually stay underground, right, and have the Soco station underground, and then portal to the south, again, just south of the Lively Middle School. And we got a lot of feedback on both those options, and there was a lot of positive feedback on extending the tunnel, recognizing that it was going to be an additional cost, but just because of the ability to locate the station more central to the sort the commercial business district of Soco and just more evenly spaced between Auditorium Shores and Old stations. So that's where we were at 15%. We got lots of feedback on it. There was, I would say, a lot of enthusiasm for option B, the long tunnel version. Okay, go to the next. So then in the process of developing the design beyond the 15%, we went back and studied all of our assumptions, all of our constraints. You know, we're sort of working through the problem, right? And one of the things we revisited was the details on the Congress Avenue Capitol View Corridor. There's a Capitol View Corridor that runs essentially from Live Oak Street, north to the Capitol Dome. We knew about that beforehand, right? And we were avoiding it beforehand. It wasn't an issue, right? So we were aware of it. But when we actually got into the details of it, we discovered some things that were a little bit surprising. So go to the next. So if you look at the top left diagram and the sort of that little eye in the viewpoint, what we realize is that all these view corridors are basically located at specific XYZ coordinates in space. And when we actually went in and analyzed the point in space on the Capitol View Corridor, the Congress Avenue Capitol View Corridor, we discovered that it actually sits about 8 feet below ground at its origin. So that the view plane was actually lower than we had expected it to be, right? So as a result, that forced us to shift the long tunnel version south a little bit further even. So we got a kind of a longer tunnel version. So that's where we are today, right? If you go to the next, right, you can see, the progression over time. Pre 15%, the two options at 15%, and then where we are now with kind of the draft 30%. It's very similar. The draft 30% is very similar to the long tunnel at the 15% in terms of the dimension. It's just a little bit farther south. So I will say there have been a lot of questions about the Capitol View Corridor. What are you going to do about that? We knew about it. We've refined our understanding about it. Could it be amended? Legally, very challenging. Only been done a couple of times. Right now, for the purposes of the design, working within the needs of the existing laws and codes, right? And this is one of them. So that's where we are. And this is part of why we're having this discussion. Share all this information with the public, get feedback so that we can incorporate that into the design progression as we move this forward. So hope that helps kind of set the stage for why we are where we are. And then I'll pass it back to Vikram and Andrew.
Hey, thanks, Peter. That was very illuminating. So Auditorium Shores Station. Now we're south of the lake. Next slide, please. So just some quick context here, folks. On Barton Springs, Riverside Drive, we're showing in this map view a walk shed, a 5-minute walk shed that extends about to where the Long Center for Performing Arts is in the west, and as far east as towards the proposed blue line, and goes up to kind of where Lady Bird Lake starts around Congress Ave. Just want to note the existing bus stops here and the station entrances, as well as the potentially impacted real estate outlined in purple. That's the footprint there. Next slide. And here we see a street level view. And Andrew, I'll let you talk us through the station. And if you could, when you get to the section view, Andrew, if you could tell us how deep the station is, I think that would help some folks out.
Sure. Yeah, happy to do that, Vikram. And I do want to point out this station is very unique. It's very constrained as well. You can see it a little bit better on the last slide, but I think this slide shows it as well. We're making a transition kind of from one section of straight alignment to another. So with that, we have some limitations on what our tunnel boring machine can do, and that limits where we can kind of place a station. And I'll just say this station is very constrained, both geometrically. We have a lot of large utilities along Riverside Drive. We have the floodplain, as was mentioned earlier, And a little bit further south, we also have a creek crossing. So I think this station in particular is probably the biggest challenge that we've had on this project from my perspective. And as a result, we did go off of the public right of way with this station, which you'll notice we do have some more impacts with this station, but I'll also, call it more opportunities, which you can see in the form of the plaza and some of those public spaces that get activated along with the station. So the more prominent plaza there between Barton Springs and Haywood, that area is going to be envisioned as the more prominent station entrance, the larger plaza. But there is also opportunity at either end, both within kind of along the long center there to the west of First Street, as well as on the corner of Riverside and Soco. We do have some room for some pedestrian activation of those areas as well, because we are off of the public right of way and we're able to activate those spaces a little bit better. So this station is very unique in that way. Of course, we do want to make sure those bus connections are really smooth and nice for the station as well. Currently, those are envisioned to be between Barton and South First Street. If you go to the next slide, I'll kind of show how those entrances interact with the underground.
And Andrew, just really quick, Peter, did you want to talk a little bit about the pedestrian tunnel
No,
here?
I'll pick it up at the end, Vikram, when we talk about the options.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, just to mention that pedestrian tunnel, you'll see that larger unpaved zone, that darker blue shape. So that currently is envisioned as a concourse, kind of like we saw downtown near Republic Square, to connect the Long Center area and Auditorium shores more directly to the station underground. So Peter will talk a little bit more about that in a bit, but that's what you see there in that darker blue. That's that underground pedestrian connection to the larger station box. This station is a 2-level station, so not quite as deep. We'll show that on the next slide, but because of that, we do have a lot of back of house elements on that concourse level. So making all that work is a bit of a challenge as well. And again, we have the northbound and southbound platforms. So we have, access to both of those sides of the platform level from that concourse level. If you go to the next slide. Oh, and then here's I think Peter's moment to chime in about the pedestrian tunnel.
Thank you, Andrew. So one of the things that we wanted to get people's thoughts about is that we are looking at where are there ways where we can optimize these stations and make them more efficient, right? Knowing where we are with costs overall, how do we actually achieve all of the design objectives that were laid out earlier by Paolo, but then maybe do that in a more efficient way. So this is an example that I think is something that we are considering internally, and I think we're going to want to get public feedback on, which is, do we really need to have that pedestrian tunnel extension, if you will, from that station entrance at Barton Springs Road, underground, connecting to the Long Center and Auditorium shores, right? Because I think if it's very complicated to build that, I will tell you. Lots of utilities in Riverside. It's kind of threading a needle. The cost of that is, over $100 million probably to do that extended entrance tunnel. So, the question is that really necessary? And do people feel like that's a really significant value add? Again, no decision needs to be made tonight or, in the next, immediate term, but I think it's something that we want to look at as an option for a way to kind of tighten this station up. And one way also to think about it, I think that the two remaining entrances do a really good job at basically projecting, focusing people, users of the system out into the neighborhood at those key corners, right? You've got on the west, you've got that entrance that's facing out towards Auditorium shores and the Long Center. And then the entrance on Congress Avenue really orients you towards the South Central waterfront and all the activity that's anticipated over there. So I think that corner, that opposing corner setup of the entrances works really well, and I think could allow us maybe to not necessarily need this underground pedestrian tunnel. So something to put on the table and want to get people's feedback on that.
And before we move on, thanks for covering that, Peter. Really good points about how the entrances are oriented towards some great areas of destination and access. So just want to point out before we move on, this station is where we were envisioning we'd launch the tunnel boring machine. So while we are having some additional impacts on the private side, we are using those for a very critical element of the project in staging and launching that machine. So that's a really critical element of the station I failed to mention earlier, but I wanted to point that out as well. I think we can move on to Soco.
Yeah. Next slide, please. So we've talked about Soco in the past on April of this year, but we wanted to include this as a discussion. Nothing really new here from our April discussion, I believe, right, Andrew? But you can talk us through it real quick.
Yeah, I would encourage people that want to learn more about this station. We did a very deep dive into this station and all the elements associated with it in that working group meeting that was just not too long ago. So we'll go a little quickly here. There's a lot more to cover. I want to make sure we leave time for the other stations as well. So just to quickly point out some elements here, we do have a few different entrance locations. One more prominent there at Elizabeth and South Congress Avenue, where we do have 2 elevators and some of the ventilation elements as well, and that nice plaza activation. Some of the other entrances are more in line with the sidewalks and a little bit more constrained for space. But we do have, as in the other stations, we have 3 elevators on this station, 2 escalators, and 2 sets of stairs on both the east and west side of the roadway. But I think we should keep moving fairly quickly through this one, and maybe we can drop a link for that other recording in the chat or something.
No, yeah, and it is located on our public engagement library. That's the South Congress Working Group meeting. Should we go to the next slide? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So just to close this one out, we would have a 3-level station here with a lot of those back of house elements located on the first level. Those vertical circulation elements from the street would access the concourse level. And we do have, in each case, multiple escalators, stairs, and elevators. But I do think we should keep moving on this one.
And Andrew, how deep are we going to be underground? Just part of the Q&A process.
Yeah, absolutely. So with our 2-level stations, so that would be Government Center and Auditorium Shores, we'd be more in the realm of 50 or 60 feet underground at the deepest point. Once we get to 3 levels, we get a little bit deeper, more in the realm of 80, 90, 100 feet in some cases, with the variation due to kind of the existing grade above. So fairly deep under the ground, especially for these 3-level stations.
Well, thanks again for walking us through. I wanted to take a break here before we transition to our downtown stations around 4th Street in the Convention Center to talk again about Auditorium Shores and Soco stations. Hopefully some of your questions have been answered in the interim, and I would encourage you, if you have a question, to click on the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. I do see a few people here. And I see that Andrew Pyle has been waiting very patiently. So Andrew, if you want to join us, just click on mute and you can be live on the air.
Hello, Andrew Pyle here. First of all, thank y'all so much, Project Connect, for y'all's hard work in this. My question is about like the location of the Capital West station between at 15th and 17th Street. I've been listening, but I haven't heard about like the logistics of. I know y'all said before that it's located there because of like proximity to the Capitol and other government buildings, but I think I remember previous designs showing that it would be like near like the like directly parallel to the Capitol itself or at 7th Street. And I know from Metro Rapid 801, there seems to be more traffic coming on and off at the Metro Rapid Capitol Station and at the 7th Street History Center station. So I'm kind of curious why y'all decided to put it 15th and 17th Street.
Well, let's see. First, Jamila, can you go back a little bit? Maybe one more. I think there's one that shows
Yeah,
the
one
walk
slide
shed.
would be good. That's good.
Yeah, yeah. And then Peter, if you want to turn on your camera, you can
Yeah.
jump in. I could certainly freestyle here too.
Yeah. So, Andrew, it's a great question, because if you remember back at 15%, we actually were looking at a number of different options on where to locate this station, right? And I think there were, one was south of 15th Street, and then there were a couple of different options, I think, north of 15th Street. And we landed here for a couple of reasons. One is, some of it's about the spacing between the surrounding stations, right? So because Republic Square station is really between 5th and 6th, it didn't, putting it down near 7th Street or the History Center is really too close, right? So that's what kind of was pushing us a little bit farther north. And then also, if you look at just the where the density is and where it's coming, there's more coming north of 15th Street than south, right? I mean, that's where the people are going to be, both workers and some new residential projects that are coming out of the ground. So we're seeing a lot of growth in that area, and I think that felt like it was a benefit to have the station proximate to that.
I did want to point out as well, because I saw a question in the Q&A, that 17th Street station entrance is right by the new Travis County Courthouse that's going up. In addition, this is serving the General Museum Station area. And while the Capitol Complex Mall is still under construction, we do expect that to become a primary destination, in addition to the workers who are there now. In addition, there was another question, and it was about 15th Street. So since we're here, Jamila, if you want to move one back to where you were before, they were asking about narrowing of lanes. Do you know, Andrew, is a travel lane being removed in this section, or is it just that it's below grade, so it looks like there's a travel lane that's disappearing?
I think we are removing one through lane. We will still have that bus only lane on the west side, and then we'll have two general purpose lanes. So I believe with this project, we are generally trying to provide wider, bike ped connections to try to serve different modes. So I think that's a longer term goal of the city. I can't speak to this being the case in every location, but you can kind of see it just north of 17th. You can see that bus only lane and the two general purpose lanes, as well as the widening and the bulb outs of the sidewalks to provide separated bike ped facilities in that location.
Thanks for that.
Andrew, I think the question was actually about 15th Street. And I don't think we're reducing any lanes on 15th Street. So maybe what I think it's a little bit, it's not monolithic around here. So maybe this is something that we should just answer in detail in the Q&A that gets published.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Peter. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. We've got one more question here from Janice. If you wanted to unmute yourself, you could be live on the air.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Sound great.
All right. My question would be, and I know you spent a lot of time working on the diagrams and thoughts about how to stage the underground rail, but considering there's a $5 billion deficit in the original budget and the current project projected cost, what would the cost difference be if building the system without the subsurface rail? How much could be saved?
Well, let's see. Is there anybody who's on the project team that could answer that at this point? I'm not sure, Peter, if you could do that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the figure.
It doesn't need to be dollars and cents.
No, I mean, it's a lot, right? I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I think it's it's a significant part of the cost, and I don't want to put out a number because I don't want to get it wrong. I mean, I think it's, again, we can go back, we can pull that out from previous memos that have been circulated. I guess what I would say is I think your question is a perfectly legitimate one, right? And certainly, one that we have to answer, right? I mean, having a underground system in the center of the system was, part of the idea for this system, and so that's why we've developed it to the point where we are today. And where we are with the costs, I mean, we have to look at ways in which we can, optimize the system, and so we're going to be having that conversation, I think, before we make any decisions about moving forward. So.
Well, thanks for that question, Janice. And again, our team is thinking about that every day. So you'll certainly be hearing more about that as we move forward. Now, let's see, I'm going to stop live Q&A for a moment because I want to get to that last section in the hopes that some folks can leave early if they need to at 7. And so I think we can move over towards the downtown transit hub. And I think we're switching out our walkthrough hosts with Lindsay and Jocelyn taking us through this section. So thank you, Andrew and Vikram. Let's slide on over.
All right, thanks, Lonnie. And if you can go to the next slide, please. All right, before I jump into the Blue Line underground stations, I want to talk about how all of these stations connect downtown and in this overall downtown transit hub. So here you see the orange line with the Republic Square station. You have the Congress Avenue station kind of in the middle there, midway along 4th Street, and then the Rainy ESB Mac station on the Blue Line there along Trinity. And I mentioned they all really connect. So for example, at the Republic Square station, because the Blue Line is planned to interline along the Orange Line, meaning that a Blue Line train can operate on the Orange Line continuing north from Republic Square, then a person who, let's say, is riding a Blue Line train from the airport could actually get off at the Orange Line station at Republic Square and transfer over to the Orange Line and go south to the further stations south on the Orange Line system. So it's really important for the overall downtown transit hub to provide for seamless, safe, convenient connections between each of the different lines and the different modes. So you'll also see those red and green lines there to the right, or east of the convention center and east of Brush Square. And the downtown transit hub makes sure to plan for the connections from the Metro Rail, both the existing red line and future green line, as well as bus throughout the system. And part of the way we do that are through each of these yellow boxes that you see. So the white boxes are the stations underground, and the yellow boxes are each of the entrances to those stations. And above the transitway, the lowest level of the tunnel, and you can go to the next slide here, you have the continuous concourse that we've been talking about that provides that connection between the stations and between each of those entrances that I'll talk about in more detail in a moment. So that at any entrance point, you access this mezzanine level or kind of the level -1. If you think of street as level 0, the concourse is level -1, and the trains are at level -2, so that you can easily navigate between any of these points. Next slide. So jumping into the Congress Avenue station, next slide. You can enter this station from Congress Avenue. So the elements that are here in the color on the left is the station entrance. So you can come in from Congress, you come down either via the elevators, stairs, or escalators and enter that concourse or mezzanine level below. And you can also enter from the Brazos Street entrance that you see there to the east, which has an elevator, stair, and escalator as well. And next slide for going one level down as we walk you through the station. So as you get to that level below, or the concourse, you then can approach the station depending on which direction you're coming from. And you have that next set of vertical circulation, or really stairs, escalators, and elevators to get you down to the platform level. And next slide. And here's that platform level where each of those items in pink are those stairs, escalators, and elevators I mentioned. There were, I think, some questions about, do you have enough capacity to get people that have mobility challenges down all the way to the platform level of the station? And you'll see that we do have planned redundancy in these elements to circulate from the street level down. So at this station, for example, you'll see there's actually up to 4 to 5 elevators ultimately that come from different entrances and different points to each station, and a similar number of stairs and escalators. And next slide. So now you can see that those are at each end of the station platform level that provide you access to that concourse level above. And next we'll move over to the Brush Square entrance. And the entrance here is just that. It's an entrance. It's not an additional station, meaning that this entrance provides access to the other 2 stations, both the Congress Avenue station as well as the Rainey ESB Max station below. So here we've got those escalators, stairs, and elevators that are right in front of the convention center and in front of Brush Square, but in the plaza area along 4th Street or east of Trinity. And what you might also notice here are some elements that are actually shown in the footprint of the existing Austin Convention Center. And those elements are for the ventilation of the tunnel to maintain safety and air quality needs for the tunnel level. And we don't intend on cutting into the convention center, but we do need to locate those elements and are trying to be mindful of not locating those elements which come out of the ground right in front of a park and right in front of the convention center. So the thought is to work with the convention center redevelopment to find a way to potentially integrate those into a future structure here. And next slide. So here's the concourse level, or 1 level below, down to the mezzanine where you come down from the street and can connect to the Congress Avenue station to the west, or turn south and go to the Rainey ESB Max station. And next. And as we approach the Rainey ESB Max station, I'll mention that there are actually multiple entrances to this station. And you see those here in yellow. I'll start from north and go south. We have entrances planned to connect to the convention center along 2nd Street and on both sides of the street, since we have what are split side platforms here in this location. And if you're wondering why we choose a side platform or a center platform, it tends to have to do with the track geometry. So for center platforms, the track has to widen around that platform in the middle, and that creates curves in the track. And those curves can't overlap with other curves. And here at the Rainey Mac station, we have the curves that are necessary to turn from Trinity to 4th Street, just north of the station, and to turn onto the bridge over Lady Bird Lake, just south of the station. That doesn't give us enough room to widen around the platform. And that's why we have the side platforms here at this spot. And then moving south of the station, there are an elevator and a stair just south of Cesar Chavez. And then to the east, along Cesar Chavez, closer to Waller Creek, we're showing a larger station entrance there with multiple elevators, escalators, and stairs. And lastly, the yellow box farthest to the south shows a pedestrian concourse ramp that will show you a little bit more of what that means here in just a moment. And that provides close access to the MS Barrientos Mexican American Cultural Center and Rainey District there to the south and the east, as well as connections to the hike and bike system and the Butler Hike and Bike Trail and the park there just to the south and north of Lady Bird Lake. Next slide. So here's those entrances in a little closer view, and you can see where we again have redundancy and access points so that there is plenty of capacity to get to the station for those with all mobility abilities. And then I'll talk about the one that is called the Ladybird Lake entrance on this figure, that's the furthest to the right, which is that pedestrian concourse ramp. I'll talk about that one in a little bit more detail because it's really different from any of the other station entrances. Next slide. So what that ramp entrance looks like is it's sort of a place where the tunnel underground that we mentioned is 2 levels, where you have the concourse above and the level for the trains and the station platforms below. Where that ramp comes out, those 2 levels split apart. And as you can see in the bottom drawing or the section, that ramp starts to come up to the surface level or to ground level, and the trains would actually stay down below in a tunnel beneath. And next slide. And you can, in plan view here, you can see where that would come out in daylight. And I'll show you some examples of what this could actually look like in the next slide. But what it is it gently slopes up. You can see here in plan view, you can see how it connects to the trails. And by sloping up to reach ground level, you can have a gentle ramp that doesn't require elevators or stairs or escalators. You just walk straight down into the concourse from the trail system here, which will connect to the Butler Hike and Bike Trail, as well as the Waterloo Greenway trails, including the new pedestrian bridges planned over Waller Creek and the Waller Creek Delta project. And next slide. A little of what that might look like to have an entrance that's really unobtrusive and blends into the park-like setting here. You can see these kind of landscaped or green roof type of environments. And what you're seeing below is where I mentioned the trains dive into that lower tunnel and the pedestrians come up at that gentle sloped ramp to daylight with a low sloped roof that you can see here in these green roof concepts. And next. And as we've gone through the different station locations on the Blue Line and the downtown transit hub, I want to talk a little bit about what Peter mentioned earlier in terms of being efficient with our designs by carefully balancing the cost and the scope of the project elements. And next slide. So the starting point is what I described earlier in terms of a continuous concourse that connects between each of these stations, all the way from Republic Square through Congress Avenue, connects to the Brush Square entrance to the Red Line and even buses that could connect in the surface in the future, and down to the Rainey ESB Max station. And some of the options we've looked at, and next slide, are prioritizing which of those connections are the most critical. So for example, providing the connection from the Red Line and from Brush Square and the Convention Center over to the Congress Avenue station, so that there's a direct pathway from those points to the Congress station without having to, say, at street level walk past the station to the entrance that's actually to the west of the station, and then kind of reverse track and come back to the station underground. This one would provide that direct shortest path connection between those points. And similarly, down to the south, they're providing the connections from the ESB MAC and Rainey District areas to the Rainey ESB MAC station. And next. So with those critical connections in mind, we looked at what some possible scope reductions could be evaluated on the project and are looking for feedback on these. And one possible reduction is to remove that concourse between the Congress Avenue station and the Orange Line, or really all the way to Republic Square connection there. And the others being the concourse between the Rainey ESB Max station and Brush Square, as well as the additional entrance east closer to Waller Creek along Cesar Chavez to the Rainey ESB Max station, since there is redundancy in entrances to that location, and there, even with removing those, would still be walkable access from each direction to those stations. And with that, I know we're running a little short on time, but would be happy to answer any questions.
It's true. There's been a lively conversation going on. And so I let everybody in the audience know, we can extend by 10 minutes or so, just so that we have time for the questions. So if you have a question, I would encourage you to place it into the Q&A. You can also raise your hand and ask questions live. And I'm going to go ahead and start where I left off with Lyndon Henry. If you unmute yourself, you'll be live on the air.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Lyndon.
I guess the main thing I wanted to respond to was the thing that Janice Rankin raised about what could be saved by eliminating subsurface construction. And the subsurface construction looks like it's a whopping multi-billion dollars altogether. I don't see that that really can be totally eliminated. Voters voted for basically a portion of downtown subway. The problem is that it's grown in length. I have proposed, as some of you know, I proposed that rather than continuing the subway under Town Lake and reaching South Austin that way, that instead the route use the 4th Street, the blue line, basically the 4th Street and then the Trinity and then the bridge across the river to get to the South Shore, and possibly have a surface station at Riverside and Congress around in that area. That would cut off, I think, at least $1 billion by doing that. And I don't know where that is in the scheme of things, but I see that the team are definitely making efforts to try to shave some cost off. I think there should be a mezzanine or concourse remaining between, I think, between Congress and at least the Guadalupe portion of the alignment. I think that would maintain access, and that's pretty critical part of the downtown system. So I just want to put my opinion in that that's one portion of it I think could be maintained. I think it's important to cut costs. We've got to find ways to do that, because if we're going to get to South Austin, we pretty much have got to continue shaving costs, and more than just eliminating concourses. And that means some changes in design. And I would hope we'd be able to do that and be able to at least get part of the South Austin section of the planned Orange Line completed in a timely fashion where people can actually see it in a good portion of their lifetime. So anyway, that's.
Thanks for giving us your feedback about this. We appreciate the service that you've been providing through the committees as well. And you're right, we are going to be looking at various different cost savings opportunities. But I'd like to go ahead and let somebody else with a question tonight continue, just because we're running low on time. So TJ, I see you here. If you unmute, you'll be live on the air.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep, go ahead.
Great. So I just put in a written comment, but I'll just say it verbally too. I was just wondering about the location of the Rainy Street and Mexican American Cultural Center location, because it seems like really more adjacent to the convention center, and the entrances that are proposed are difficult to walk to Rainy Street and a long, difficult walk to actually get to the Mexican American Cultural Center. So was there any consideration to put that station further south, closer to like the shoreline where the tunnel would be, to come above ground and like make the connection to that district better? Because like if I look at the South Congress station, it's like right in the middle of South Congress, whereas this would require people to walk on a narrow sidewalk along Cesar Chavez and then up a hill to get to Rainy Street, or the MAC is even further away.
Thanks for that, TJ. I know that Lindsay, you've worked on that. And I'm not sure if Peter wants to chime in as well. And also, I'm not sure, Lindsay, is this the best view to work from to explain this?
This is a great screen, and I'm happy to take a stab at it. It's a great question, one we've thought a lot about, and Peter, feel free to jump in. So a lot of, really almost entirely all of what governs where that station is located has to do with the light rail design criteria and the constraints we have to work with in terms of what the trains can do, both vertically and horizontally. So they have to be at a certain height above Lady Bird Lake for us to maintain necessary clearances above the lake. And then they can only go down so fast or at a certain steepness of slope to get underground. And we have to get deep enough, fast enough to maintain clearance above our tunnel for the utilities under Cesar Chavez Street. So the main reason is that we have to keep those utilities, the ones that have to cross on Cesar Chavez and can't be rerouted around. We have to keep those there, and our tunnel has to be low enough below it. So we can't really bring the station any further south and meet those design criteria for the trains to get up and over the lake at a slope that they can accomplish. But I do want to mention also that while I understand it seems like it's far away, and I maybe didn't highlight it as well as I could have, but there are various bridges, multiple actually, planned to cross Waller Creek, the pedestrian and the lattice bridges, that would provide close access to the MAC and really not far away the Rainy District. So you can see that from the MAC, it's just a little over a quarter of a mile, which is generally considered a walkable distance here from the MAC to the Rainy ESB MAC station, which can be accessed in a pretty direct path with those new pedestrian bridges going across the creek. And Peter,
So like
if I missed anything.
a 5 to 7 minute walk. I'm always like quarter mile, I don't know, but it takes me 5 to 7 minutes. And then you're talking about getting access at that Lady Bird Lake entrance.
Yes.
More
That's
often
right.
than not. I know that there was also discussion earlier about the creek itself, that trying to go through a creek is it makes it difficult.
Yeah. Lots of people have asked, well, why not, why didn't we just have it over on, say, Red River, or be further to the east and closer to that area? And a big part of that is Waller Creek itself. So Waller Creek is deep on its own, and then there's the flood control tunnel, and you have to go not only under those, but there's actually a very large underground easement that we can't encroach upon. That's like a big invisible circle around that tunnel that we can't touch. And it would just create a depth that is not technically feasible to cross from the east side over there under the creek to then still be able to serve the convention center and Congress areas.
Well, thanks for that walkthrough, Lindsay. I'm going to open up the mic for Marty Combs. If you unmute, you'll be live on the air. Oh, I guess you pulled your hand down instead, and that's fine. If you decide that you'd like to, you can always put your hand back up. Let's see, I'm going to skip over just because you all have asked a question already. I'm going to let Varun speak first. So Varun, if you'd like, you can unmute and you can be live in the air.
Hey, Lonnie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I just heard someone earlier bring up that it wasn't a full decision on whether you were going to still pursue the underground options or overground options, and there was cost considerations discussed. I was just wondering if there's also been an analysis done on the time for deployment of, say, an overground bus rapid versus light rail or underground rail line as part of the decision process.
Thanks for that. So Varun, I know that before the election, there was serious consideration given to bus rapid transit versus light rail transit. on each of the corridors that were identified. Some corridors are being built for Metro Rapid. You can look at the Expo Center line, the Pleasant Valley line, also the extensions that are proposed for the 803 and even future extensions. For these particular lines, the orange line is Route 801, and the blue line is Route 20. And they also, the buses share those streets as well. So these are some of our highest ridership lines currently. And future projections showed that bus rapid transit wouldn't quite provide the capacity needed. So that once the system was really operating, it would be a very short period of time before it needed to be upgraded to light rail. So that's why light rail was considered. As for on the surface or below grade, during the election, there was a downtown tunnel suggested. This team has been working through that. And at the same time, there are some financial considerations. And so this team is going to be considering what options we have, but also, and I want to be very clear about this, going to the community, talking about our values and our requirements and needs and considerations to inform how we address the cost issue. So I would not expect the team to just come talking about trade-offs and financing, but rather to host a discussion first with the community about our values as a community to inform that decision-making moving forward. Let's see, so we're really at time. And so we don't have time to get to all of the questions today. I will say that this entire team is working on the Q&A that has been submitted in writing, and will be posting a final feedback document talking about what this meeting was like, and it will be posted on our website. You can currently go to projectconnect.com, and at the top of the screen, there are two red buttons. One is to get involved and hear about upcoming meetings or to engage in a committee. The other button is for the public engagement library, and you can see an archive of every meeting, the PowerPoints, the video, and the final summary report there, including this one, which will likely take about a week to post. So I'd encourage you to go there, get involved. And also, if you have feedback that we didn't get to today, please feel free to email us at feedback@catmetro.org or go to projectconnect.com and contact us through the website. Well, with that, that covers our subway stations overview for now. We're looking forward to seeing you at a future meeting. Until then, good night.